Hello and welcome to Writer Mother Monster. I'm your host, Laura Ehrlich, and our guest this evening is Toni McLellan. Toni is a marketing writer by day and around-the-clock phrase gatherer. For 2 decades, she's written for major magazines and brands, including a stint as an outdoor family travel writer. She's also published essays with Outside, KitchenAid, and Fort Collins magazine. Now, she collaborates with brands and their amazing marketing teams to help them find the right words. If she could do it all over again, she'd be a TV writer and showrunner like Michael Schur or Pamela Adlon. For years, she thought she was going to write the great American novel, but her life took another path. In 2022, Toni started New to Me Phrases, a weekly newsletter dedicated to curiosity, language, and humor. She lives in a quaint town northwest of Chicago with her husband, their 3 neurodiverse and queer adult kids, 3 parrots, a fish named Carpone, and a pink axolotl named Mimi. She describes writer motherhood in 3 words as need an office, and don't we all? Now, please join me in welcoming Toni.
Hi there.
Hi, Toni. It's so great to have you back. The last time we saw you was when we had a panel on non-gender specific children, non-gender binary children and motherhood. And it's a pleasure to have you back today.
It's really great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. Now let's start with those 3 words you used to describe writer motherhood. Again, that was need an office, which resonates with me, as I'm sure it does with many listeners.
Yes. So right before the pandemic hit, we relocated. We had lived in this little town of Woodstock for years. We went to Colorado for a couple of years, came back, bought a house that did not afford space for me to have an office. And it's kind of a recurring thing that has happened where I've had to sacrifice my office for a family member, et cetera. So I just really don't have one. And then there's all of us on top of each other for a couple years now, right? And fortunately, we all get along. We all like each other. But I definitely, I fantasize about putting a tiny house in my backyard or getting an Airstream or just having something like a place to go. It used to be coffee shops for me, but I have asthma. I really have no interest in getting COVID over and over again. So my husband used to joke, he would call it, you need an F office. I don't know if we can swear on here, but that's what we would call it. So my fuck office, basically, to tell everybody to F off so I can concentrate. But I was thinking about this today, thinking about being on the show. And I realized, though, that I do get a lot from taking time alone. I'm always 50-50 introvert, extrovert. But I miss my people, too. I think that I'm not the toil away in a cabin for months on end writer. I think it's just that I need consistent breaks in order to use my brain without being interrupted nonstop, which I kind of am right now.
Yeah, I hear you. I feel like I've seen a lot of people, specifically mothers lately, talking about that old thing about writing every day and at the same time, and how that just is some weird patriarchal a piece of advice that's been passed down through the decades, and it just doesn't work, especially for working mothers or just for mothers, period. And it certainly doesn't work for me. So I'm interested in what you're saying, that you can kind of work in bursts and find space to really dive deep into a project where you're not interrupted. And that's how I get most of my work done as well, is to take a 2-day retreat or something. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. I mean, so it's so funny because for years I was like, why can't I be like X writer? She toils away at her desk 8 hours a day and she produces so much and she's so great and this and that. And at age 45, I was diagnosed with ADHD. I was talking to my therapist and I brought up something like, I'm thinking about making some videos with my kids about what if a bagel was your best friend and we'd take the bagel to the park and stuff. And she kind of looked at me and she was like, has anyone ever talked to you about whether or not you have ADHD? And we went, she ran me through the tests, and it was like, picture of me next to every trait, and it really hit home for me. It was such a great discovery because it, like, when you're diagnosed with something like that, there's like a through line through your whole life. Like every teacher that told me to sit still or to not sit in a weird way or to stop daydreaming, or because why study women? Why study girls? Why nobody knew anything? That's my running joke about, medical studies is why study women? Why study?
It's only half
why would that hurt anyone, right? And even still, it's harder to diagnose girls and women with autism, ASD, ADHD, and it's because it's like heart attack. The symptoms are different, right? So for me, it was really like, oh, I can write a paragraph and walk around the block, and write a paragraph and walk around the block, and write a paragraph and walk around the block, and that works for me. Like there's something about, and I understand hyperfocus now, which is an aspect of ADHD where, contrary to popular belief that we can't concentrate on anything, we love extremes. So concentrate on nothing and then concentrate on only one thing for 6 hours. Yes, give me that. I love that. And so it's really helped me be able to shape my work and to not beat myself up so much for lacking discernment. That's another thing. Like ADHDers have no sense of time. That's another like really wild one. We have no sense of time. And so my therapist has worked with me through the years. Bless that woman. So like time block, not in any sort of strict, like you must follow this schedule, speaking of patriarchal, like weird, but like to really visually be able to see, oh shit, I only have 3 hours today to think. So I need to kind of plan for my thinking time. That's been a huge, huge benefit. And then the lack of discernment piece is like, we want to pay attention to everything and we want to do everything. If you ask me for my favorite movie, I will tell you 5 movies. There can be only one for someone with ADHD. So as a mom, it has meant creating in the in-between spaces, those little interstitial moments, when the house is quiet. I'm a morning person, but I've been finding since the pandemic that I get the most done after dinner because everyone's off on their own. It's quiet. The pets are going to sleep, everything. So,
yeah, and you have a lot of pets there.
We do. It's quiet here.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about ADHD and, adult diagnosis of ADHD. And I think, and this is just sort of on a personal note, I think my mother possibly has ADHD or is on the spectrum somewhere. And it was just never diagnosed. She's in her 70s. And my sister and I brought it up to her and she's like, oh yeah. I kind of figured that out about myself a long time ago. But it just wasn't really something, as she was growing up and even into her adulthood that was talked about or that was even positioned as a possibility. So tell me a little bit again about how it felt to be asked that question and to explore that part of yourself. That did it just kind of seem like it was always part of yourself that you were kind of wondering about and a piece fell into place? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I used to joke about it. I mean, my standard line about it is it's the least surprising diagnosis anyone's ever received, So yeah, and like for your mom and like my parents' generation, my parents are a little bit older, or were. This wasn't done. You don't go to therapy. You don't talk about your feelings. You don't take pills, brain pills. No, why would you do that? That's a sign of weakness. I mean, just barrier after barrier after just socially imposed barrier after socially imposed barrier,
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm Gen X, and I think my gen is much more open to therapeutic interventions, and I tried one of the stimulants. It was okay. I've actually tried a different medication that is really helping me. Because I have the sidecar to ADHD, anxiety, depression.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like the holy trinity for neurotypicals, neuroatypicals. So, I mean, it wasn't surprising. It was a relief. It was really a relief. Like, okay, now there are tools and techniques that I can employ, and like this, like, level of grace and understanding. Like, I'm not defective, or I'm not any more defective than anybody else. I'm just different, and I have different needs, and I need to respect those.
Grace and understanding from yourself.
Yes.
Yeah. Sounds
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
like.
I'm at that midlife phase where it's like, I don't need grace and understanding from anybody else. Just in full hag mode at this point. So
That's a good place to be. I think I'm almost there. I look forward to the full on hag. I'm like half hag.
It's beautiful. I love it. I
Oh,
love it here. Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about your 3 children who you said are also neuroatypical, and how your own diagnosis maybe has helped you to navigate theirs.
It's been really interesting because they're all Gen Z. So my kids are 23, 20, and 18. So all adults, all registered voters. Yay. And I think an even more interesting through line than just me was my father-in-law. We were pretty sure that he was on the spectrum. And as my middle son with ASD was being diagnosed, typically known as Asperger's, but the nomenclature changes through the years. Right now it's ASD. It healed my father-in-law much as my diagnosis healed me, where my father-in-law was like, oh, like, wow. And my mother-in-law kept pointing it out. Look at this, look at this, look at this. And so it was kind of cool to see the 2 generations heal each other. Like, we were finding answers for our son, and my father-in-law was finding answers for himself. And that was really cool. With my kids and me, we didn't have as much of that experience, but it was more like, we joke around a lot. I'll be like, sorry for your brain. That's on me. One of my kids has ADHD. Another one has been diagnosed with it. So it's in our families. Both things are in our families. I'm 100% convinced both of my parents were ADHD.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Do you find that with how do I want to say this? With the change in generations, and now, therapy is much more sort of mainstream. I also grew up feeling like therapy was for those who are weak, or like who really need mental, assistance and stuff. And I go to a therapist, I take medication for anxiety as well. And it's just a thing, right? And it's a tool now that we can use. But did you find that with that shift in acceptance, well, how did you, I will back up. How was that shift in acceptance for you as you sort of grew up and transitioned into therapy and took matters into your own hands, so to speak?
It was very incremental for me because part of my anxiety, this is how anxious I am. So I love Google Docs where I collect things. It's just one of my hoarding shiny object things. I have a Google Doc of all of the things that make me anxious that I'm too anxious to share with anyone because I'm scared it'll make them anxious too. It's very like,
Love that.
and I was scared to take meds. I was just outright like, it's going to change me, or it's going to make me a zombie, or it's look at the side effects. And the side effects are no joke. Like, the side effects are no joke. And they vary person to person, et cetera. They're no fun, but I'm at the point where I'm no longer in a complete state of panic all the time or having suicidal ideations. I'll take the side effects. Thank you. Like, it took me a long time, and I was very into alternative health for a long time. And God bless the Maintenance Phase podcast. Can we plug another podcast? Have you heard of Maintenance Phase? It's
Please
phenomenal.
do. Yeah.
Debunks the wellness industry. But it was always like, and I'm not dunking on alternative wellness for this, but it was kind of like I made a lot of excuses. Like, what if we give the kids magnesium? Or what if I took this? Because I was scared to put my kids on meds too. As a parent, it is very scary. It especially if you're anxious like me and you're afraid of medication. Like it's a whole journey. I started an essay that I never finished, which is classic me, about like my son and I both starting a medication. One of my sons and I starting the same medication on the same day, like, and just me like sitting there with that pill in my hand, like, oh, wow, this is happening. And that child has said it's like night and day. My anxiety, it's like night and day now. Like they can actually like cope with existing. Why would I want to deny my kid that? And I fully recognize that there's so much we don't know about these meds. I fully get it. Like 20 years from now, it's going to be like, oh my God, you put your children on that. I mean, I fully accept that, but we have the science that we have right now. We have the data that we have right now. I trust my medical providers and my shrink, and here we are.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you mentioned an essay that you didn't finish and how that's typical for you, but you've also finished many, many essays. So tell us and travel writing as well, but shift over to writing and tell us a little bit about your body of work, maybe starting with the essays and working toward the other projects that you work on, while I get a little blanket for my feet because I'm cold.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. I'm wearing like my shearling boots because this is an old house and it's not, the walls are clearly not insulated. So,
oh yes, same.
Yeah. I wrote a poem this summer about going on meds. I wrote an essay about trying to manage your sex life when your spouse travels full time. That's one. My children refuse to read that. They also don't read my newsletter, and it's a running joke that they don't read it. Which it's so funny because like, you think they're your little pals and stuff, but it's like, no, they're like their own autonomous people. And if you think about all your friends, like they don't want to interact with their parents on that level either. Not that I make my kids my pals, but it's just like one of those like weird things. I wrote one about my beautiful friend who helped me learn how to garden during the pandemic. She like knows all the Latin names. It's like disturbing how much she knows.
I don't even know the English names for plants, honestly, but
it's so great. And like she loves sharing her plant knowledge. And so I wrote about that, like the generosity of gardeners. And so shout out Kathleen. And I wrote one about chronic pain and learning to have to step back from doing the things I love the most due to a catastrophic injury and just having what one surgeon called shitty genetics. So yeah. So the topics range. I have another essay that I haven't sold yet, and I still haven't figured it out, but it's about my mother-in-law and losing her to like dementia that came on suddenly after an illness. So it was like snappy. There was no gradual decline. It was like viral. Something happened to her brain. And I wrote an essay about her and another woman in my life who have been really significant role models. I haven't figured out how to rework that one. I just haven't figured it out yet. But someday I want to get that one out in the world as a tribute to those women. And
we could go in any of those directions, but I'm going to follow the first one that you mentioned, sex life when your spouse, because I think that's a fun one. So tell us a little bit about that essay.
I mean, it was so funny because like one weekend he came home and I was sick, and another weekend he came home and he was sick. And it was just like, and sometimes he would come home and I was dealing with a lot of pain, and I would be like, this is our only chance. It was almost like you have to schedule it in. And that was annoying because it's like, oh, there's no more spontaneity, And so that was just kind of the crux of it, was just the things you learn. We've been married now 25 years, and you learn a lot about each other through different life phases. You go through so many changes, and that particular job, which did eventually grow really hard on us, like just him being gone, he was gone weekdays, for weeks on end, and he'd be home on the weekend. He'd fly home on the weekend. His mom was ailing, so one weekend a month he would fly out to see his mom. I mean, so it was just a lot of separation. And then like when it was almost like the perfect conditions had to align for us to get together, So, and I love that writing that essay mortifies my kids on some level. It really brings me deep joy to horrify
Oh,
them.
definitely. No, I can, yeah, solidarity. I have said on the show before that my daughter sleeps in bed with me, which started during the pandemic when she was lonely and scared. And so how do you tell like a 4-year-old that she can't, have company at night? But it's persisted. So now she sleeps in bed with me, and my husband has moved to the couch because we only have a queen size bed and she takes
Yeah.
up all the space. And so the only times that we really have to be intimate are if my parents take my daughter for a night, and that happens every 6 months maybe. And like the last time that happened, one of us got food poisoning. So it was like,
I know.
so I will have to read that article for some tips on how to keep the flame going, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, yeah, and it's on my website. I linked to it on my website. The magazine has since folded. It was Fort Collins Magazine back when I was living in Colorado. It was a really, really well done magazine. A lot of it was one of those regionals, so a lot of ads, just ad based. But they folded during the pandemic, I think. But it's still available online. So
Okay, yeah, we'll link to it.
it's called The Best Laid Plans.
Love it. Speaking of puns and wordplay and everything, tell us about your newsletter.
So this is one of those things where it has been during the pandemic where I finally realized, like, so I have a knack for dialogue. I definitely have a knack for writing fiction. And through the years, I have never been able to finish a novel. And again, ADHD, no surprise there. And I know there are plenty of authors with this neuroatypical scenario, but and no ideas for fiction were coming to me. It was like, I realized that like essays and nonfiction and memoir appealed to me more. And I just started letting go of the idea that I'm going to write and sell a novel. And it's interesting when you let go of something like that, what space opens up for other things. And so one of my many Google Docs, I also have a Google Doc where I just save funny headlines. But I was collecting new to me phrases, and they were just funny word mashups. And so the very first one was corn fart. And I was like, and somehow I tucked it in a Google Doc, and I was like, and and I wrote about it in one of the newsletters. It was like, an artist based, I think in Mexico, just made a t-shirt that says corn fart. And there's like an ear of corn. I don't even get it. It was a subject line in an email, just said corn fart. And I was like, that's really something. That's just really something. And then I started collecting them. And my first idea was, no attribution, no explanation, just save the phrases because they're amusing to me. And then the more phrases I started gathering from other people, because like if anyone out there is listening and you can pay me to read long form journalism and narrative nonfiction for the rest of my life, sign me up. I'm ready. I love reading both of those things. I realized that I wanted to credit those people, So then I started making, so now this Google Doc is massive. It's like almost 60 pages long. And it's getting hard to open the thing. Like I'm going to have to start a second Google Doc. And I thought, oh, what the hell? Why don't I like start sharing these? Why don't I wanted a creative outlet too, because I was so burnt out 2 years into the pandemic. I was just crispy fried. I'd let go of fiction. I had no ideas for essays because I didn't leave my house or go anywhere. And I didn't want to complain about the pandemic in my essays. I do that with my friends, So I was like, let's do this. Let's just see if it would catch on with other people. And so here we are. New to Me Phrases was born. I couldn't think of a better name for it. So it stayed NTMP, and it's on Substack. I haven't decided if I'm going to stay on Substack or not. So I haven't redirected the URL yet, but I own the URL too. I hoard those too. So.
Oh, sure. I love all of your Google Docs. This is like, it's amazing. I also love Google Docs for that reason. And you can open them up like on your phone and just add something. And yeah.
Oh yeah. And all of my friends know about this. So like I won't hear from someone for months, and they'll just send me, Monkey Butler, and it's like, And somebody sent me one the other day and she just wrote in all caps for the document, and so in the newsletter I'll credit, a lot of times I'll say my pal Tim sent me this, my pal that sent me that. So it's this beautiful collaborative thing where I do get to give writers credit and or phrase seekers credit. My another friend just sends me screen caps of funny tweets and there'll be a phrase in there, so then I mention who wrote the tweet, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, and it's the most fun I've ever had writing. It is so much fun. I love it so much. It never feels like work. And I don't think that all writing should feel this way. Like, I don't think, that whole, what's that saying? Like, you don't feel like you're working and that's how you found your it's like, no, some writing really does need to be effortful. We really do need to dig deep for it. But there's just something about this that has broken open my creative self again. Like I was drag kicking and screaming into marketing writing. And after the magazine world dried up, like I started out writing for magazines and then I pivoted to marketing. I make much better money, much faster than I ever did writing for magazines. And I did pretty well writing for magazines. But I was crispy burnt because I wrote to not have to feel constant terror during the pandemic.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I get that. And as somebody also who has done marketing and marketing writing, I understand.
Yeah. And I like it. I do like it now. Like the cool thing too is that I've come around. I'm lucky. I have amazing clients. One of my friends says she has a no assholes rule. I'm not going to work with assholes. And being self-employed, you get to make that call, right? Like not every team is perfect. Self-employment is not some kind of pipe dream where every hour is your own and whatever. I mean, you still have to answer to clients. You still have to answer to people. You still have to, you don't get paid time off, et cetera, But I now really enjoy the challenge of how can I tell a story that will be compelling to my clients' readers? How can I create something? And you can bring storytelling into it in ways that I think can be fun and playful at times. Not all projects are like that, but when I get the opportunity, it's a lot of fun to infuse personality and story, and help move the needle for someone that's maybe trying to do something good in the world. That to me is like the magic combo. One of my biggest clients is a community college. I am team community college. I don't know how or when making fun of community college became a thing. I'm sure there's so many like classist stuff operating there, but there's such a benefit to our communities. And I'm just team CC all the way. Right. So it's that work has meaning for me, but it's not I still always want my stories, my creative things, it's just separate.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
So what is it? Just go back a little bit to the newsletter and how it's sort of broken open a new creative vein for you, or is it that it allows you to be sort of playful on the page, or draw that out a little bit for us?
Yeah. Yes, it does allow me to be playful. Because it's not just sharing funny phrases. A lot of times the phrases are just interesting. And so for me, it's a way of chasing curiosity and even sharing the connection of, I read this newsletter and they quoted this website and this website had this phrase on it. And this phrase is really cool. And so it's kind of like all those little touch points and then getting to kind of nerd out about, this is the actual name of a bird that went extinct in such and such. It's a delightful phrase. And so it's kind of like this, my love of knowledge, my thirst for knowledge with humor. Several of the phrases are really artful dunks on Trump, which I'm just petty to my core and always enjoy. I see less of them now, and I kind of feel like, but earlier on, I think there's probably like 14 of them or something that are just like chef's kiss, very funny. So it's just this whole mashup of all these different things. There's really profound stuff in there, and then things like corn fart, right? So giving myself permission to create this has allowed me to start turning my eyes to what else do I want to, what do I really want to create? What am I here for? If it's not going to be the great American novel, and I'm not going to get to be the next Michael Shore, because quite frankly, I'm just too tired. I don't want to go to LA or New York. I want to be a goblin in my house. Right? So what else, and so I'm getting back into podcasting, which that I'll share stuff about that like next year when that's coming. Like a buddy of mine and I are gonna do a new we used to do a show a few years ago that we're gonna do something. It's just, I started experimenting with poetry this summer. I've started what could become a memoir, all since just giving myself permission to write that newsletter. I've been toying around with a series of essays about being in a body and being a woman at this point in our culture, and leaving diet culture and being a fat woman in this culture, and living with chronic pain and like not being able to do the things. So it's kind of like all these intertwisted, like the health piece and then the decades of dieting only to still end up fat. Right. And it's like the mental health thing, right? If I could only just try, if I could just try a little harder, where the research shows diets don't work. They don't work. Not like 95 to 98% of the time. It just leads to disordered eating. So yeah, it just from a one dumb newsletter, like I call it my dumb newsletter. And I love that newsletter with my whole heart, but it's all of these, it's opened the floodgates for me to show up as me in my writing and in other things that I create, which is pretty
incredible,
amazing. Yeah. Like I think if anyone were to ask me for advice, like do that, find a playground, find like a writing playground, find a creative playground that you just might not even think means all that much, and just dedicate yourself to it for a while and just play and see what else shows up.
That's amazing. And actually a good transition to you possibly sharing a little bit of what's come up. So you mentioned you wrote a poem over the summer. If you'd like to read that, or anything of your choosing that you have since sort of just landed upon after having written this newsletter.
Okay. I think I pulled up my chronic pain essay, and I'm just going to read a couple graphs from that.
Yeah, please. I'll give you the whole screen here. So
oh God,
take it away, Toni.
I'm just going to read and not look at my face on the whole screen because it's like really, oh my God. Thank you. This is just kind of partway in, but there's a quote. It's easy for people to fetishize. So the name of the essay, I didn't choose this name. I can't remember what I named it, but it's called Chronic Pain Changed the Way I Think About Sufferfests. When your love for the outdoors meets chronic pain, you grieve and then you adapt. And so it's easy for people to fetishize discomfort, the good pain of hard work outdoors, when they don't live with the chronic suffering and discouragement that comes from having a sick body. Outside's Blair Braverman once wrote in her Tough Love column. So even if you don't buy into our cultural obsession with youth, it's easy enough to assume that if you stay active, good health will persist even as you age. This calculated optimism makes it tough to go from effortlessly strong and healthy to settling for the crumbs of endurance that chronic pain allows you on any given day. I wasn't sure how I could manage this decline in such a big part of my identity, hiking with the ghost of the adventurer I once was. And I conclude it with, pain forced me to rethink my own obsession with metrics and the drive to suffer in service of one-upping myself. It's been frustrating to recalibrate my expectations, but slowing down and doing less gave me the unexpected gift of learning to be fully present in the wild places I love so much. Hiking shorter trails I used to dismiss as a waste of time. My senses can more fully open up to my surroundings. A patch of moss here, an unfamiliar bird call there, the spring of loamy earth under a body still able to move under its own power.
Thank you. That was beautiful.
Thank you. I'm proud of that one.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Remind us where we can read it.
That is on Outside Online.
Okay.
So, and I link to it also from my website. So if you want me to send anything, I can for show notes, whatever. But Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm really proud of that one. That one, yeah.
Yeah. What was the reception? Did you have people reach out to you?
A couple readers wrote to me with like alternative cure stuff,
Oh, okay.
because it was about being diagnosed with like spinal stenosis and degenerative disc disease, which it turns out like people over 50, most of us have it and we don't even know it. Like there's a huge something like 80% of people have it, don't even know it, and go the rest of their lives without even realizing it. It's just like one theory is that it's like a downside of going upright instead of staying on all fours.
Hmm.
So, but a couple people with chronic pain wrote me and said, "Thank you. I just feel so seen by this." And that's why we write, right? It's to create that connection, to say, "Hey, this is my experience, but maybe you can see yourself in that too, and we can, reflect together." So.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually that leads us to the last time you were on the show in the panel about uh, non-binary parents and children, and you shared with us a little bit about your own child's journey. So remind us a little bit of where you are in that path, in that journey, I guess, and,
Yeah.
and give us an update.
Well, here's one time I'm really glad my kids don't pay attention to my work because it is a scary time to be a parent of queer kids and trans kids. It is a really scary time. My oldest son is gay and my youngest child my daughter is trans, and she is doing pretty well. What I have found in general for all of us is the pandemic has taken a tremendous toll on our ability to be people outside of our house. We have not been the family that's just been like wild and free and back to normal. And, I have enough friends with long COVID. So I think without, giving away too much stuff about her, I want to protect her privacy, but she's had some struggles for sure. And, the trans dysphoria, which is kind of like this, to really, I hope I don't mangle how to explain this because I understand it in my own mind, but I don't really know the clinical.
Mm-hmm.
But it's, the friction you feel and the trauma and anxiety that you feel when you don't pass, when you know inside that you're female or male, but you're not passing. So that can cause a lot of stress. And so her fear of not passing is a huge source of anxiety for her. And
18, just to remind us.
yeah, she's 18. Yeah. And and she's painfully shy. And her bestie moved away in April 2020. So he's back in Illinois, which is great. And he's been 100% accepting of her transition, which is yay to non-toxic masculine friends, right? Yeah. So, and I don't know what she knows about the current groomer thing that people have started up as like, let's smash this minority group in order to gain power, which is all that's about. There's no concern for children. It's just a bald power grab that is setting back LGBTQ rights decades, endangering people, endangering careers. It's just the soullessness of it grinds at me. I can just be completely frank. As a parent, it is terrifying. It is. And yet we have pride flags out front. I wear my proud mom trans tee around, and it's interesting, how you get received in a small town. We're a liberal small town and we're a trans friendly small town. It's pretty rare, but we're in Illinois, which is around Chicago. It's more liberal. I encountered some transphobia during a focus group for my city.
Whoa.
And yeah, some woman started talking about that Woodstock's considered woke and that we have this parade here and this and that. And I'm the only one in a mask in the room. And I said, I'm 100% great with all of that. Sign me up, And so I didn't make any friends in that room. And I called out the homophobia, and yeah, the poor marketing team had to separate us basically from arguing. That's
Good
my
for you.
contribution, I guess, it's hard. It's hard, you know, I I'm almost speechless. Like,
Yeah.
that's how things are going.
Yeah.
I don't it is important to me though not to pass that on to my kids. Like, and I don't know if that's right or wrong. We talk about things honestly, like there are certain places you can't live, honey, because it won't be safe for you,
Yeah.
right? Like, um, but it's rough. It's really rough. And that's for me as a mom. Imagine being the individual who is being scapegoated for political power
Yeah.
for no reason other than they're
That
not as powerful as the people who want to keep themselves in power.
Yeah,
It's gross.
it is. And I was going to ask you this, but I think you've already touched on it. So maybe just draw it out a little bit more. But tell me how you navigate the tension between fear for your child and being a supportive advocate for your child. And like that
Yeah.
must be such a hard position to be in, where you're afraid of others, actions or reactions, but you want to be supportive of their true selves. How does that
Yeah.
work?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, I think I've probably hit on that enough. I mean, I there is a tension there in my hope for her is that she sees the beauty in herself that the rest of her family sees, and that she she won't be as afraid of not passing as time goes on, that it won't be as much of an issue for her. But there's a lot caught up in that of my own cishet privilege of saying,
Mhm.
well, don't worry about what other people think, It's like, no, my life is in danger if I don't worry what other people think, right? And she doesn't come across that way, but it is the reality.
Yeah.
And so it is a delicate balance to navigate, for sure.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
to me, the most important thing is I love you no matter what. I support you. We're going to get you all the support. She's in therapy. She has a great Lurie Gender Clinic in Chicago, A+ if you're in the Chicago area. I believe they do sliding scale for families who don't have insurance or who have crappy insurance. A+, highly recommend. The staff there are incredible. Our family physician is phenomenal. Is again living in a liberal town and stuff. Like, she's been going to this doctor her whole life, and they're like, "Oh, okay, this is your name now. Okay, we'll change it on everything. Okay, great, welcome." Like,
Mm.
and not all families get that, that's something you don't think about, but like going and getting medical care. Like, she had a podiatry issue, and I'm like, oh God, how do I know if this practice is going to misgender her on purpose or
Yeah.
be cruel to her or deny her care or like
Yeah.
the whole thing. And again, that's my worry. She's got to carry that too. So
Uh, Tell
yeah.
me how that has affected you as a writer. I think we've got sort of how you're navigating it as a mother, but how does it kind of play into your craft and your career, if at all?
I don't know yet. I don't know yet. It is not something that I have written about yet in terms of like essay or anything like that. Only because I feel like we're still in it. I, I don't know. Like for essay writers, I think sometimes you need a little bit more in the rear view to be able to do that. But it's, at many points I was gonna, and I knew a colleague who, she had a blog based around mothering boys. And at one point I had that idea, like, oh, mothering boys, da, da, da. And then it's like, well, what if one of them turns out not to be a boy anymore? you know, I don't know. So it's just, it's, if anything, I've always been an ally. I've always been an ally. And so to me, it's so wonderful. And my husband is like the least homophobic man I've ever met. And so I think it's so wonderful that these kids came to us. Um, I think I'm already empathetic, but the only way that it really impacts my work is to be an ally with my clients, to do things like have your pronouns on your Zoom call. That impacts my marketing work, and just the empathy and recognition of privileges, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's huge. It seems like such a small thing to put your pronouns on your Zoom call, but I mean, you see, I have mine here on in StreamYard, and it feels like something. It's like the least we can do, right?
Yeah. I didn't even think to do mine. I was so nervous.
No, it's okay. Yeah.
But yeah, it's in my email. It's on my Zoom. And at first I was like, what if a client doesn't want to work with me because they see that? And I'm like, why the fuck would I want to work with someone who's transphobic? Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't need your money.
That's just the first hint that that's a nightmare client, right? So you don't need those people.
Exactly. Yeah. It was like in that focus group meeting, everyone was congenial and nice. And then when the bigotry came out, it was like, wow, this is what this room is about. And I was the only person who said anything. And it was like, it's so, I don't know. I don't know where that's going to end up in my work, quite frankly. I really don't, other than to just try to show up and be as much of an ally as I can, and to be a safe person for people, because it's like when you speak out about someone who's being racist, anti-Semitic, homophobic, you don't know who else in the room can't speak out or is afraid to speak out. And you do it for them. You don't do it for you. You do it for them.
Yeah. I think that's one of the best definitions of an ally that I've heard. I think that's such a fraught word.
I know.
Because you can be sort of a false ally or, a self-serving ally, but I think you just articulated that beautifully, and that it's about being an ally for a person and what they need.
Yeah.
And you offer that. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I live with this fantasy of, I have a child with a disability, and my brother has Down syndrome. So I grew up with a sibling with a IDD, intellectual developmental disability. And the idea of one of my favorite long form essays is about the curb cut effect. And shame on me for not remembering her name, but I'm frankly terrible with details unless I have them written down. So, but a sociologist wrote about this, about in Berkeley, when they did the first curb cuts, ramps for wheelchair access, they observed that mothers with strollers, delivery people with dolly carts, skateboarders were all using it. And the curb cut effect kind of explains that when you make access available for everyone, it benefits the broader society. And diversity, equity, and inclusion benefits the broader society. We are a richer culture when nobody has to code switch or stay in the closet or not share their beliefs, that they're non-oppressive beliefs, because there's a lot of false equivalency about, why can't I share my Nazi viewpoint? It's like, because you're a Nazi. That's why. I mean, so yeah, to me, like, part of it is, I will never give up that vision of a world where we create access for everyone to all the good things that our culture has to offer. I'll never give up on that. And that will always show up in my work, I think.
That's wonderful. And actually, that's another good prompt to share a little bit more of your work if you're so willing.
Oh boy.
And you can choose.
All right, this is the poem. This is hard because I'm not a poet. I'm not a poet, so it's like,
no, this is a safe space, Toni.
I wrote poetry in high school, and then like my friend and I have made fun of it for decades, and so like I think the poetry thing is just like, oh my god, I'm actually doing this.
Go for it. I'm going to isolate you here. There you
go. This is more of a mental health one, but it's called In Case of Emergency, Break Glass. Traversing the Sertraline Canyon, trying to find my way back to me and to you, I resign myself to another pill to complete my circuits and wait to cross. Sifting through the nesting dolls of lives we and I might have lived, is it better or worse to see so many roads not taken, choked with weeds, impenetrable? How much time is left for me, for us, to do the things we've talked about into the night, by the fire, beneath the stars, under whirring blades? As with all good things, I always want more. Are the windows closing in or opening? Let's find out. So
Thank you.
that's that.
No, I mean, you undersold yourself. That was great. Yeah.
The poets are all cringing. If there's any poets watching, sorry. I just
No.
my all-time favorite tweet is I can't remember who did it. Once again, I'm terrible. I write down attribution. I'm just not good at thinking of it at the time, but it's, we get it, poets. Things are like other things.
It's accurate.
I love it so much. So yeah, thank you for inviting me to read. That's not something I usually do.
So. Oh no, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. And actually we have just a little bit longer. So I want to ask you, because we've read a poem and an essay and we talked about the newsletter and all these amazing things that you're working on. What made you want to write the Great American Novel? So like, why was that the thing you had to abandon in order to create all of these other rich projects?
Two things. One is I had a dream and a story came to me and I started writing. This was in 2007. I started writing day and night for 6 months. I ignored my kids, my laundry. At one point I left my car running and went into a store. Thank God I live in a small town, because I was working on a plot line and I was like, oh my God, this is it. I'm a fiction writer. It's official. I can do it. I can do this. And it's actually pretty good. Narrator. It was not pretty good, but it was like, oh my God, this is what writing can be like after years of freelancing for magazines. And I never finished that novel. And I think I kept waiting for that feeling to come back. And it never really did. But it really did feel like that's a common story. Like people were like conduits and the idea comes and we got to chase it, right? As the years passed, I think it became more of an ego trip. I wanted to do the book signing, not do the work to write the novel. Straight up. And I have an ADHD. So writing alone in a silo is not a thing that's easy for me. So I may still write a novel. I don't know, but it was, I think letting go of that dream is one of the best gifts I've given myself. It doesn't mean it's gone forever. It just means that it's not waiting in the wings and stopping me from bringing other things in.
Yeah, I think that's really empowering. And I share that old dream with you of the Great American Novel. And I think it was something like from, in school, you're reading essentially the Great American Novels and you're sort of conditioned to think that if you're going to be a writer, that's what you write. You write like Of Mice and Men or The Great Gatsby or something, definitive. And I wonder where that comes from. No one ever told me if you're going to be a writer, you have to write Of War and Peace, but
I don't, I wonder if like the MFA programs spur that on. I don't know, because I love genre fiction. I love it unapologetically. I don't care for literary fiction, for most literary fiction. I haven't read enough of it, frankly, and I'm an English lit major. But I love genre fic. And I think if I can plug one though, literary fic, it was Wilderness by Lance Weller. It's one of the best novels I've read in the last 20 years. It's phenomenal. So
I haven't read that. I'll add it to the list.
So I think it's his only novel so far too, but just, it's been a while since I read it, but like it made me sob uncontrollably and laugh until I cried at two different points in the work. And to me, it's like, okay, I can, it was very, very good. It's a rough story. Good.
It touches on all the emotions. I like it.
Yeah, but genre fic lets you escape a little bit more, I think. I think reality is hard enough, it's especially now, that I'd rather read about another world or another time or a meet cute or whatever. I mean,
Yeah, honestly, I've been reading a lot of thrillers. That's like all I can read at night.
Yeah,
In part
yeah,
because if I'm reading something really like, not that it can't be literary, but something very literary, I'll want to be up and like underline things and be thinking, and it'll keep me up.
it's like
So
work.
I read, yeah, it's work exactly. So I read the dime store thrillers, and it something about the worst case scenario novel, even though it's we're sort of living in a worst case
Yeah,
scenario. It's like, okay, it could always be worse.
100%. Yeah,
It's like calming.
yeah, 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 exactly. I totally get it. I totally get it.
It's
Yeah.
pretty crazy. But I am glad. I feel like I learned a lesson from you on how to um, release myself from that externally imposed perception of what a writer is and that goal, that great American novel, and to find the thing that you really just love doing, a playground or a sandbox or whatever, to
Yeah,
sort of
yeah,
rediscover your creativity. So
yeah.
that is invaluable.
I'm so glad. I'm really so glad. That's great. It's really
Yeah,
great to hear. I hope others derive something from that too, because it's been a real great experience.
I'm sure they will. And you'll
Yeah.
have to come back when the new essay is published and when the podcast begins. And
I would love
you have
that.
so many things, so many irons in the fire. So that's exciting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Toni, for joining us again. And we'll look forward to the next conversation. But it's been such a pleasure.
Likewise. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Toni. And thank you all for joining us tonight. If you enjoyed the episode as much as I did, as always, please consider becoming a patron or patroness of Writer Mother Monster to help me keep this podcast going. It's a one-woman show. And as you can see from various glitches throughout the episodes, I need all the help I can get. So every little bit counts. And thank you to our sponsors, patrons, and patronesses, all of whom are mentioned on the WriterMotherMonster.com webpage under the support tab. You can join them. And thank you all so much again for coming tonight. And I'll see you next week.